Let's talk about all this now with Amanda Makki, who's a Republican strategist and attorney, and she joins us now. Good morning to you, Amanda.
Good morning.
Good morning. It was, as they always are, a very lengthy inauguration process in which America claps itself on the back and says that it's the forefront of democracy and does all these amazing things. Was it an historic day, though? I mean, there's lots of excitement about getting Donald Trump out of office from those who oppose Donald Trump, lots of anger from lots of the Trump supporters, and lots of excitement about Kamala Harris being the new vice president as a woman and as a woman of colour. Was it really historic, or was it actually back to normal service being resumed?
Well, I think there was just a lot of interest, speculation as to what would happen yesterday. Would Trump show up? Would he not show up? I think it was, for the most part, it went off without a hitch. Of course, the Washington, D.C., Capitol Hill area was fortified like no other. Might as well have been safer than any green zone, which in essence it was. And so I think that what we saw yesterday was the transfer of power happen. But what was remarkable about this, aside from a woman of color and all those different superlatives, was the fact that 2 weeks ago, on that very same Tuesday, 2 weeks before, you saw a completely different scene at the Capitol.
Yeah.
I worked on Capitol Hill for a decade. We're used to seeing protesters every day when we go to work. That's your freedom of speech. And you walk past them and you go to work, and that's fine. But scaling the walls, scaling the buildings, stealing federal property, destruction of federal property, the killing, beating of a Capitol police officer, that's not what we're used to seeing. That's not peaceful protesting.
It was something of a contrast, wasn't it? And I think that is a fair point, that democracy has prevailed. It was an election fairly won, whatever the Trump supporters insist on saying. But we know huge numbers of Republicans still believe that was an unfair contest and that the presidency has been stolen from them and they're the rightful man in the public office. Many Democrats, a large minority of Democrats, also believe that. How is Joe Biden going to bring the country back together? I mean, he has a long history as a senator, and goodness me, he has had a long history as a senator, where he has, worked across the floor, had very good relationships with Republicans, and we know, he was Obama's sort of negotiator. One of the reasons he was chosen as his vice president for a very inexperienced President Obama was that he knew how to operate on Capitol Hill. How is he going to reach across the floor if we then are having impeachment process going on of Donald Trump?
Well, you make a really great point. Joe Biden served in the Senate for 37 years. He does have great relationships with Mitch McConnell, who is the Republican leader, just as an example. But when you are talking about unification, bringing a divided country together, when 75 million people voted for President Trump and 30% of Democrats believe it was not a free and fair election, you have to heal and you have to unite the country. And he said that in his speech yesterday. But within hours, he did the complete opposite, which was to undo 15 executive orders, more than more than the last four presidents combined did on the first day. Basically, he did as many as they did in 12 days. Yeah. That was symbolic. He sent a message. We are changing things up. And that's what he did yesterday. So to your point, if we're going to impeachment, if you're seeing censorship of conservative voices, how are you going to tell the American people, no, I'm the healer, I'm the uniter, but I'm going to now impeach a private citizen who is 1,000 miles away, and I'm going to, allow for the censorship of conservative voices. I'm going to undo, climate issues, building the wall, all those things that are very, very controversial issues right now, instead of focusing on COVID, which is what everyone wants the president to focus on.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. And this is the problem with presidential rule by executive order, isn't it? Is that they can be undone immediately by the next president, and something perhaps Joe Biden needs to bear in mind for his presidency. But increasingly, presidents of all political stripes are using executive orders, and that by definition then doesn't have, congressional support. But how you talk about the symbolism, how significant is not the symbolism, but the reality of, for instance, rescinding that sort of ban on immigration from largely Muslim countries, the rules on masks and social distancing on federal property. That includes, by the way, most highways in the United States as well. The climate change move to rejoin the Paris Climate Agreement. How significant are those in practical terms?
Well, I think the immigration one is significant because he basically stopped the wall from being built, which Republican, Democrat, or independent, that's an important issue for keeping the homeland safe. That's an important issue for a lot of Americans. But coupled with that was a huge immigration bill that would give citizenship to 11 million illegals that was sent to Congress yesterday. So that, I would say, is the most significant. On climate change, rejoining the Paris Climate Accords was, again, very important because there is a belief that China and India are getting off where America is being held responsible for the rest of the world. Keystone XL pipeline, for example, where you have strong U.S.-Canada relationship there, you have 11,000 jobs, $2 billion in wages that's cut off. But most importantly, stopping the Keystone XL pipeline from taking barrels of oil from Canada to the Gulf of Texas limits by 1 million barrels a day for the American family. And so when you have that limitation, so you have 1 million less barrels a day, how is America going to make that up? They're going to become dependent on foreign oil once again. We've been independent of that for 70 years now. In 70 years, we have been independent of that under President Trump's leadership. Those are the types of things that have an immediate impact on families. Whereas, a mask mandate on, highways and byways and federal lands, America has the most stringent mask mandates of the world. So people here are wearing masks.
Yeah, I was going to say to everyone, and how's that working out for you? But there we are. I will have to leave it there. Really interesting to talk to you. Amanda Makki, Republican strategist and attorney. Thank you very much for joining us. Let's turn our attention back to the inauguration yesterday of Joe Biden as the 46th President of the United States. Let's talk to Kevin Chavous, who's a Democratic strategist and attorney and former president of the D.C. Young Democrats and is live from Washington, D.C. right now. Good morning to you, Kevin.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much for joining us this morning. Very early hours of the morning for you, of course, on a very significant day. Lots of the papers here, and I know the American media saying this was a historic day, particularly because Kamala Harris is the first woman vice president. But in terms of it being historic, a point I put to a Republican strategist earlier, a lot of this is really about just returning American politics and indeed world politics to some semblance of normality after a roller coaster ride with Donald Trump for 4 years. How much more normal do you think things will be?
That's a good question, and it remains to be seen. Look, it was historic. We're very excited about Kamala Harris being elected vice president, the first woman, the first Black woman, the first South Asian woman to hold executive office. So it's very impressive. But I think a lot of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris's focus in the first 3 months or so will be to kind of calm things down and try to make sure they preach unity. We saw that theme throughout President Biden's inauguration speech. He was very careful to, although he took some not so thinly veiled jabs at President Trump, he didn't really mention him by name.
No, and Donald Trump didn't mention Joe Biden in his speech either.
Right, yeah, and that was sort of to be expected, but no, he didn't. And I think that at this point, after the last 4 years, for a lot of Americans, normal will be good. I mean, Joe Biden is not somebody who people were expecting to bring about dramatic change. They looked at him as someone who could just sort of do the job, not really create too much controversy. But he is appearing to embrace some more radical and more aggressive ideas. We'll see if he pushes for those moving forward. But I thought it was a very positive day overall. I was very glad and proud that none of the dire predictions of violence came to be. And I think that's something that Americans were happy about.
And I did detect, I think, even on the Republican side as well, a sense of just relief that we had extraordinary military presence there, more military there than there were guests for the inauguration. Among those fears, 2 weeks on from that storming of the Capitol building by Trump supporters, that there could be any repeat of that. The fact that it went off without a hitch, without any violence, I think a great relief to everyone who believes in democracy. And Joe Biden said he was talking about democracy prevailing, but he was also talking about being the president, for everyone. Now, it was very much more, a more inclusive presidential address from Capitol Hill than we certainly had from Donald Trump when he became president, which was kept very much to the partisan lines, very unusually, because it is what Joe Biden did yesterday was very much the norm. But how easy is it going to be for him to unite the country? First thing he did was sit down and sign 15 executive orders, as is his right. Rescinding the Muslim country travel ban, signing back up. He wants to go back to the Paris Climate Agreement, and executive orders regarding COVID as well. A lot of this will be very controversial, and a lot of the moves, to impeach Donald Trump, that trial effectively that's going to go ahead in the Senate, will be very controversial. At the end of the day, despite much of the American media saying, "Oh, this is what America wants," he may have had the biggest vote ever in an American presidency for him, but the second biggest vote was for Donald Trump. How is he going to unite the country, given that he's himself is as they all are, a partisan president?
I'm not envious of the job that is in front of him. It is going to be very difficult because, as you mentioned, there are a lot of people who are very upset about the results of the election, and the country is deeply divided. There's so much negative partisanship where people are focused on voting against one side, sometimes even more than voting for their side. I think Donald Trump used that to his advantage, too, being able to bring his base together sort of around not wanting certain things or not wanting certain groups of people let in. It always seemed to be couched in those terms with Donald Trump. But I think that we know that Joe Biden is an experienced political figure. He's been in Washington for over 40 years. So with him, it's completely different from Donald Trump, who was a political novice. And I think he made some mistakes that really cost him in the end, where you talk about the relationships and unity and forging that unity. I think President Biden is one of the best people at this time to attempt to do that because he's worked in Congress for a long time. He can talk to Senator McConnell, or he can reach out to people in the House. He does have those relationships. That's one of the things that some people in the Democratic Party were nervous about with him, his relationships with people on the other side.
Yeah.
But I think it's a good thing for the president to have that.
I absolutely agree with you, and I'm frankly just relieved the inauguration ceremony's over, because I was getting cold just watching all those many hours that we sat through. Those are long performances, aren't they?